And welcome, guys. We're really excited. We have another awesome indie spotlight today, and we're gonna be looking at a really cool new webcomic that I think everyone's gonna really dig. My name is Michael. I'm one of the co-founders of Wicked Publishing and your co-host for the evening. I'm joined by fellow co-founder and co-host Matt. What's up, Matt?
How are we doing, everybody?
And as I said, today we're joined by a really awesome creator. Jonathan is here with us to talk about his new webcomic, Journey to the Middle Kingdom. And so, welcome, Jonathan. How are you doing today?
Doing great. How are you guys?
Doing excellent. I appreciate it. And again, we're really excited to have you on the show. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and why you got into comics?
All right. My name is Jonathan Hopp. I'm the creator of Journey to the Middle Kingdom, which is a webcomic I actually started a few weeks ago. This is my first foray into webcomics. I've never done this before. But this is an idea I had some years ago, and I finally got the time and the energy to be able to put into it and try to make it a real thing. So here we are. I've got the website going. I've got the comic going, publishing twice a week, Wednesdays and Fridays. And I am the writer for it. It kind of grew out of my study of the Chinese language. I started learning Japanese when I was in high school. And then when I got to university, I was like, okay, wow, I can take a bunch of languages, so let's take Chinese. It sounds awesome.
Wow, that's wild.
Right. And so I'm there the first week of class, I'm really super psyched, got my books and everything. And then we start, and I look at the script, right? I look at the writing, and I'm intimidated.
Yeah, I bet.
Super intimidated. Just like how am I gonna I'm really good at speaking languages. Like I went to an international school when I was a kid, which is for German. So I'm good at I'm very used to speaking and being in different culture. But this, I looked at it, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just gonna be am I gonna be able to do this? And so I started studying the language, and I ditched the writing aspect up and just tried to speak it.
Okay.
Which is fine for a while, but after a while you can't do that anymore. And so as I studied more and more, I tried to think about, how can I learn these characters more and more. I started to come up with stories as I would learn how to write. And that kind of sparked my imagination, and that kind of is what led to this webcomic.
Wow, that's pretty fascinating. I really love that story. That's really kind of an interesting take that I've never really heard before. Very interesting inspiration. And it's interesting. I took when I was in high school, I took a year of Japanese, and I know, and so I even as little as I've studied, I definitely know how hard those languages can be. Japanese, Chinese, they're a whole different ball game than different say Spanish, for example. So that's really fascinating. And I love how you brought that into your comic here. Now, sorry, go ahead. Were you gonna say something there?
Oh no, go ahead.
Sorry. What I was going to mention is your comic is, as you mentioned, is Journey to the Middle Kingdom, and it's inspired by Chinese folklore and fairy tales. Can you maybe give us a brief synopsis and tell us a little bit about what the story is about?
So the story is basically about three sort of American teenagers, and they're flung, back in time to this world of Chinese fairy tales where they're supposed to fix history, essentially. So they are, exactly. They're gifted three magical brushes by the King of the Chinese Heavens, which is the Jade Emperor. And the brushes are magical, and they basically, whenever you write a Chinese character in the air, whatever you write becomes real.
Okay.
So
interesting.
That's their superpower.
So when you can you give me an example of how they would use their powers then?
So yeah, exactly. So in the introduction, so they get their brushes, and eventually they have to defend themselves, right? So if you write, for example, wind, you could write in the air, and then you'll be able to blow your enemies back with a gust of wind, for example.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's pretty awesome, man.
Your imagination wants, right? If you want super strength, you could write the character for strength, and then you would be super strong.
Oh wow! So they're actually writing the Chinese characters then?
Yeah, exactly. So they part of the challenge for the individual characters is for the characters in the story is to sort of learn how to write as they go along, and that kind of mirrors to me my experience learning the Chinese language was learning bit by bit.
Yeah, that's pretty clever. I really like that kind of weaving that not only into the story, but it really works as a nice system for the magic that you've created here. Definitely a unique take on it, and
Yeah, so
that's awesome.
it works like I taught Chinese actually when used to be an elementary school teacher for about 8 years, and I used to
Okay.
teach second and third grade at an immersion school. So the idea of an immersion school is that the kids are supposed to spend part of their day in their target language. By that I mean that I'm supposed to speak purely in Chinese for several hours, and they're little kids, so they pick it up really quickly. And
Hmm.
one of the like techniques I use to get kids, because Chinese characters are very like intimidating for an adult, you can imagine what they're like for a child. But what we would do is we would learn them by making up little stories as we
Hmm.
wrote them out, and that would help the kids remember. Okay, this part is like for example, like this part's a man, and this part is a heart, and the man's giving his heart to his wife, and that's like sort of a way in which to memorize the character. And
Hmm.
they'd be like weird, funny little stories that kids would make up, but it was fun
Hmm.
and it did help.
That's really clever. Yeah, kind of reminds me of like when you have to remember things in school. Coming up with little tricks like that uh, to kind of help you remember.
It makes it a lot more
Now,
fun.
yeah, yeah, it really does, and it help. Not only does it make it fun, but yeah, it makes it a lot easier to remember because of that nature.
Exactly.
Now, you said this is a brand new endeavor for you. It's a new webcomic, and you started very
Yep.
recently. I think you said just about a week ago. So what has it been like for you so far? Just kind of breaking into the scene here and kind of starting your first webcomic.
So it's been a lot of fun to be honest with you. It's a lot of work. I won't get you. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot of work. Luckily, so I'm my day job is I'm a software engineer, so I was able to make my own website. So that was a big load off my shoulders. A lot of people who come up with web comics have issues with the technical aspect of things. You know what I'm saying? Getting the
Mm,
website set up, being able
sure,
to use
yeah.
social media. Like that could be a headache if you're not versed in tech, right?
So that was like something you could just get out of the way because of your background.
Right, exactly. So I got the website up and running, but then I thought to myself, okay, like there's so many web comics, there's so many people out there. There's so I gotta get into social media, learn how to do that. Gotta learn how to interact with people. How do I, get this in front of people so they can, see it and enjoy it? That's the kind of, that's a challenge for me personally, because I'm not, I don't have a background in promotion. I've never done a web comic before. This is a brand new thing for me, so it's been a lot of fun, but a lot of work.
Yeah, really, and especially since you're doing a web comic, unlike a kind of a traditional comic, you kind of have more strict schedule. It sounds like you kind of did you say you're doing a weekly release? Was it
Oh, so every Wednesday and Friday is what I'm
every
doing right
Wednesday
now. So
releasing a
every Wednesday
page?
and Friday we have a page. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, see and so that's and keeping up with that pace. I can imagine it can also be kind of challenging in its own way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I try. I'm a planner. I like to, work with the schedule. So, it's very important that when you're doing. Well, one thing I learned when during my research, before I got into this endeavor, is that with webcomics, it's very important you stick to a schedule that your viewers know that you're going to stick to.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. You
You
don't
know,
want to deviate too much, I'd imagine.
yeah, like if you're gonna release every week, then release every week. If you release every week for a while, but then some weeks you drop, I know life happens, and things like that. But if you drop for like several weeks, your viewers can't really tune in every week, right? And so it's harder to build a base of people who really are into what you've written in your story. So having it at that regular clip is really important. So, before I started this, I wanted to, ask myself, can I really commit to this? The time, the effort, and making sure I can meet the schedule. And, so far I'm doing it.
And what made you want to do a webcomic format?
So, well, the first thing is it's accessible, right? So, the comic is available on my website. It's available on Tapas and it's available on Webtoons. So it's a medium. I look at comics online too already. I go on Tapas and I like to see just randomly like who is on there. So I already do that platform. So I felt that this would be the most accessible for the most people. Was just have a website and make it generally available.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I like that you're reaching out to a lot of different platforms as well, trying to get the broadest reach and range that you can get on the comic and get all the eyes you can. That's a good way to do
Exactly.
it. Now I'm pulling up a little bit of art here. What can you tell us about this piece here?
So basically, what the format I want to kind of give, like, paint a little picture for you. So you've got the three main characters on the cover here: Jason, Sabrina, Michelle. And like I said, they were flung back in time to sort of this fairy tale, ancient world of Chinese fairy tales. And each issue, after is going to take them to a different story. And there are a ton of Chinese fairy tales. And the reason I know that is because part of, like, I got to about the second or third year of Chinese, and like I told you before, I thought, well, I'll just skip writing, right? Like, writing is hard. I'll just
Mm-hmm.
try to be a really good speaker, right? I'll be a good conversationalist. And that was fine for a while, but at a certain point, you can't do that.
Right, it can only take you so far,
Like,
really.
yeah, exactly. So I was like, okay, well, I need to learn how to read, but I want something interesting. So I got a series of books that is essentially a very famous series of books that is basically called like Chinese, like children's tales. And they
Mm.
have a list of tales, like 10 or 12 for each month. And it's a series of books. So you'll have like 10 or 12 tales for the month of October, 10 or 12 tales for the month of September, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And each issue is going to, the heroes are essentially going to go and participate in one of these stories. For example, the issue you see in front of you here is the Princes of Yelang. So that is its own specific story, and they'll have to take part in it. And there is an aspect of the story that's missing or that's gone wrong, and the heroes have to figure out what it is and sort of fix history and make it right.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Interesting. It's almost like I don't know if you've ever seen the show Quantum Leap. Almost like a
Yes.
little bit of Quantum Leap esque, going on there, which I love because I'm a big fan of that show.
Even when I was a kid, this concept kind of reminds me of old cartoon I used to watch called Time Squad, and
Huh.
they would do kind of the same thing, but in cartoon antic style. It was a pretty good way of
Right.
teaching kids like history. It's one of the things
Yeah.
I will
True.
say kind of piqued a little bit more of my interest in history, being like, was it that kind of crazy? Like, or is this like, well, now that I'm older, obviously it wasn't fully 100% that way, but Time
It
Squad
gets you
kind
curious
of
and learning and asking questions.
exactly getting
Yeah.
exactly at making you ask those questions to figure out for you. And like seeing this, I see a little bit of that. But my question is, for certain stories, are there going to be like, do they take part as like characters of the story, or they're still they themselves in a sense?
So that's an excellent question because it depends on the story. I've got a lot of them planned out already. Some of them, I'll say that they'll have to actually take part. They'll have to actually figure out what their role should be in the story and then basically assume that role. And for some of them, they're more outside looking in. They'll have to participate, but they may not necessarily know what's going on.
No,
Because,
sense of variety.
yeah, exactly. So, for example, the main character, Jason, he is, as far as the character's background, he was born in China but moved to the United States when he was 7. So he is, he knows Chinese culture from his parents and his grandparents, and he would learn as a kid. But because he moved at such a young age to America, he kind of knows the stories, but doesn't necessarily know all of them, right? Because when you're a kid and your parents are trying to like teach you something, sometimes you're a little bit resistant.
So
So
is this a?
he,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Yes, continue. Sorry. No, I was. You go ahead, please.
Yeah, so like for example, he would know, like, they'll be like, let's say the Princes of Yelang, right? That is a pretty famous story. But you might know parts of it, but you might not know other parts of it, depending on how much you're paying attention to when your grandparents are trying to teach you. So that kind of, each story we're gonna have a little bit different role for the heroes to play. So like either they have to participate in the story to make sure it goes the way it should. Sometimes we'll have to figure out what piece is missing and try to restore it. And sometimes they'll just be flung into it and they're not going to know what they're supposed to do in terms of figure out as they go.
That's pretty awesome. I really love that because it really kind of makes the mystery part really central, and them having to kind of figure out, okay, what do we got to do here? Like what's happening? It's that does have a really nice level of mystery and kind of intrigue to the comic.
Because the audience, I'm assuming, I don't want to like assume, but like, right, the Princess of Yelang, either you know what that story's about?
No, not really.
That's fine. You know what I'm saying? And I kind of feel for the reader. It sort of unfolds, and you get to learn about it with the characters.
Nice. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's a
feel like.
pretty good concept right there.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I think you're right. Now, I wanted to ask, what time period are these gonna be in different time periods? The different stories?
Oh yeah, so I picked for the first story arc, I picked one of the four classic Chinese tales. So right there's four stories that you can consider like the foundational stories of Chinese fantasy, right? So the first
Mm.
one is Legend of the White Snake Maiden, and that's like sort of the first story arc. And there's other smaller stories that they kind of jump in and out of, right? So like the Princes of Yelang, the Lady of the Great Wall, um, was the Three Great Evils, the Voyages of Jungkook. So each one they'll kind of like step in and out of different ones, and they're all in different time periods. They might go to the Ming Dynasty in one issue. They might go all the way back to the Zhou Dynasty in another. So it's like the past that the characters are inhabiting just depends on what story they happen to be in at that time.
It's so nice. Again, just kind of allowing you to tell all these different types of stories and styles, and do what you really want to do with this, with all these different, comics.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not limiting myself to any one dynasty. So, you know what I'm saying? If for the Voyages of Jungkook, Jungkook is the dude who basically went on the voyage and he made it all the way from China to East Africa. And they'll take part in that story. And that happens, I think, around the Ming Dynasty. Some other stories happen much later, the Qing Dynasty, which is like the 1700s, 1800s. And then some stories go all the way back to the Warring Kingdoms period, which takes thousands of years, like 1,000 years earlier. So the time period is sort of very flexible because these are a lot of these are fairy tales. So they're just
Ah,
sort of
okay. Oh, that's cool. So yeah, very tale, much like a fairy tale style, where you can kind of pick up a story and read it and get a complete story in one issue. Is that kind of the idea?
that is exactly the idea.
Ah, that's great. I like that. That's really cool. Again, not something I've really seen done recently, especially indie comics. So that's very cool take on it. I love that. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like you can pick up, get a new fairy tale each time, and kind of dive into these really interesting stories.
yeah, exactly. It's like I said, I did this initially as reading practice, and then I found out that
Mm,
there's just so many of these stories that are not generally known outside of China. And
yeah.
some are, but I thought to myself, this is a great background, for a webcomic for these characters to sort of explore.
Yeah, I think you're right because I mean, like with Japanese folklore, I feel like with anime is starting to get more and more mainstream. But with Chinese folklore, I feel like there's still a lot of it that is not as mainstream, and especially here in the Western
Oh
country.
yeah, definitely. I mean, to be honest, there's very few that I even know of. I mean, the main one that I know of is to be honest, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, the story of the Warring period where three kingdoms, Wu, Wei, and Shu, basically fought each other to take over China after the
That's
Han
classic.
period ended.
Classic, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I figure that's one of the more main ones because got me interested in that was actually playing the game Dynasty Warriors and seeing
Okay.
Yep.
how long they've been going. I was like, you know what? I'm actually going to look into this, and I guess it's more a lot of historians want to say it's real, but they're not
There's always
sure
an element.
if there's a.
Yeah,
They
it's
believe a
both.
lot of fiction is in it, but
Huh.
they do
Really
believe the events are real, but
interesting.
they're highly
Right. So, like there is a
fictionalized,
South
like mythologies are.
exactly. Like there probably exists a Cao Cao. There probably exists a Liu Bei and a Zhuge Liang and all these other characters from the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Now, if we're going to be real specific as to what specifically they said or did, that's up for debate. But
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Like Lu Bu's red hair, where it was basically covered in his enemy's blood, and they can never wash it away. And it's like, okay, that's probably fiction right there.
right.
Yeah, maybe just a little bit.
Exactly. A little spice to zest it
Embellishment,
up.
exactly. You gotta. No, that's great. Uh, Now, going back to the webcomic aspect of your book here. What made you choose is there anything you could tell us maybe about like the inspiration behind your art style or how you choose to approach it? I feel like you have a very very unique visual style that like really works well for this. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so let's take the picture you're showing here. So
Mm-hmm.
back to the Legend of the White Snake Maiden. So that is a story that probably existed 1,000 years ago. It's one of I'm saying a lot of folklore and fairy tales. You really can't pin exactly when the story first was started to circulate. But in print, it's probably around 500 to 600 years old, right? And in that story, it's basically the basis of the story. There's different variations, but the one I chose to retell and to use for my purposes is the love story angle, right? So on the left, you have Bai Sujun, and she is a snake spirit that can assume human form. And her goal is essentially to achieve enlightenment. She is, in Chinese mythology, which I've always thought was really cool, is that nothing is static. So, like, let's say you start off as a lower being, you
Mm-hmm.
can, through enlightenment and practice and self cultivation, become a higher being. You don't have to be stuck in
Mm-hmm.
any one sort of mode. So she starts off as a snake spirit, but she gains enlightenment. She gains greater power. She can assume human form, and she's on this road to achieving enlightenment. But along the way, she falls in love with a human, the guy on the right, whose name is Xu Xian, and he is a sort of scholarly, erudite, kind of nice guy. And they're meeting. This is a famous scene where they're meeting at what's called the Broken Bridge at Westlake, and it's raining, and there's different variations as to how they meet specifically, but it's pretty much love at first sight. So she meets this human, they fall in love, and it's forbidden by the laws of nature, right? So she's a spirit, she's not human, she's not supposed to fall in love with a human, but she does. And they just put caution to the wind and they get married. And that's sort of what sparks the conflict of the story is that so like I said, like this picture you see right here, you see like the cherry blossoms in the background, you see the rain, you see like the sort of style. I wanted to go with this style specifically because I think it captures more what I feel is like like sort of Chinese. So it's got a
Mm-hmm.
familiar anime vibe to it, but it's not anime, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you mean. It definitely it has those elements, but then it's very much your own style and still doing your own thing with it. And I feel like the
Right, exactly.
coloring especially brings out the landscape. I feel like it really draws your eye in. It's very evocative with the coloring.
One of the big differences between like let's say a Chinese well they call it manhua, but like a Chinese manga would be like they
Mm-hmm.
prefer brighter, more vibrant colors.
Hmm.
So like the background
Yeah,
of the landscapes are going to stand out more.
that makes a lot of sense actually. Yeah, and I can see why they'd like that. It definitely brings out a lot more of the elements. It kind of almost combines that Western comic coloring with the Eastern or Japanese style with the manga. It has a little bit of both elements there.
Yeah, I'm trying to like I'm trying to be like sensitive to like I am talking to a Western audience who has used to a certain visual style, but at the same time I kind of want to challenge that audience into like this is not an anime that you like necessarily as you're visually used to it.
Mm-hmm. No, that's pretty smart. Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah, and I really love the concept of the whole thing. I find it so interesting that you can explore all these different stories and you have a big chance to kind of dive into stuff. Now, this first one, the first story that you've done on the web for the web series, is this the one that is about the three brushes then?
Yes, exactly. So right now I'm doing sort of the intro, right? So like my goal is okay, the audience we've got these three heroes. I want the audience to get to know them. I want the audience to, say understand what they are as people, they have this life, and then I want them to understand how they there's a little bit of mystery. And I don't play coy. A lot of it's you can think of it sort of like isekai, right? Where like the heroes are thrust off into another world.
Yeah, okay. right? Because and since they're dealing with all these issues, they're kind of it's almost like seeing a modern person because are they from a these I believe if you correct me they were from a modern era, right?
Oh yeah, like so the three main characters they live in Oregon. So like they are
Mm-hmm.
high school students. They're 15 years old. They've got their own lives.
And so to see it'll be interesting to see how these characters kind of interact with these famous or these legendary kind of mythologies in Chinese folklore and fairy tales. And so you'll have these iconic moments, but then of course you'll have the characters kind of coming into the scene as well. So it'll be interesting to see how the dynamic changes that.
Yeah, exactly, and that to me is the fun part. And it's also sort of I wanted to explore how their individual characteristics sort of weave in because part of the theme is that they were chosen for this, and so what is it about them individually and their relationship with each other that is going to help them with their eventual mission to write history and make sure that these fairy tales and this history happens as it should. Like, why were they chosen? Why were they taken away from their lives? Because, like I said, they're high schoolers. That's a time in your life where you're sort of starting to learn to do your own thing. Like, what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What do you want to study? What do you think? What form or shape do you want your future to be? And they're sort of thrust out of that on this mission. And I wanted to sort of like juxtapose that, take that in opposition to, well, you have this mission and you're going to be meeting these historical figures. You're going to be meeting Cao Cao. You're going to meet Zhuge Liang. You're going to meet the Lady of the Great Wall, and you're going to be thrust into these stories. And what are you going to do? Let's see what happens.
Right, and it's interesting because, like you said, it's those early years when you're really developing, and so this is kind of like them finding themselves in a way, during these adventures. So I feel like there could be a lot of good character
Exactly.
development along the way. And
Yeah,
but it also
that
begs.
part.
No, no. What was that? What were you gonna say there?
Oh no, that part's really interesting because my thing, I write short stories like besides web comics, I do a lot of like educational writing, and I also write short stories. And personally, for me, I like to focus a lot on characterization. So like the question is, you have your characters when you start the story, and you have your characters when you end the story. What's changed?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question I want to constantly be asking myself throughout this.
And so the characters that we meet at the beginning are not going to be the same when we see them at the end.
Right, exactly. I'll let you in a little secret. I've got like the first three story arcs completely worked out, outlined, and
Oh
ready to
wow.
go. I've thought long and hard about this.
Well, and it makes me kind of beg the question when you were talking about them going on these missions, trying to correct history and whatnot. It kind of makes me wonder, like, who's sending them, and why. And it kind of almost it makes me think of like, are we going to get like a modern day style, like Assassin's Creed storyline where we get to see kind of what's also happening in their modern life as well?
Yeah, I mean, funny you should mention that there is a much larger game going on. So in the
Nice.
page one, I start off with the main character Jason. He's playing basketball. He's kind of a jock. He's doing his thing, and then he sees his phoenix like in the window, like just bam.
Mm.
So I'm not playing coy with the reader, right? I'm like, there's something mystical going on from the get go.
Okay, interesting. A larger plot to dive into and kind of explore.
Exactly, and so like they get hit with this where they have the mystical reach into their mundane world, and so from that, it's sort of like, okay, well, where do we fit in this? Like, what is actually going on? Like, it's at first they're very focused on their mission, but then there's a larger picture going on, and then as the story unfolds, the reader and the characters will both learn what the larger picture is.
Okay, and you're gonna kind of slowly unfold that mystery.
Yes, exactly.
Very nice. And it's funny in the chat. Neostar says here, so an isekai means dynasty warriors, eh? I can dig that.
That's
I
awesome.
can see that.
All right. Yeah, that's a good combination right there. Now there are three main characters in the series, and maybe we can kind of talk about a little bit about each one. And so,
Sure.
what is this character's name? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about her.
All right, her name's Michelle Jones. Each of the characters has a brush, as you've mentioned, right? That's sort of the magic system. Is these brushes are used. You can write a character in the air, and whatever you write becomes real. On their brush, you'll find as the reader, like later on the webcomic, their brushes are unique to the character. Her character is Sheen, which is heart, and so she is sort of the artist of the group. She's very perceptive. She's very sensitive. She is in tune with feelings and emotion, and she is sort of the first one to really get in touch with this other world that's sort of reaching out from the other plane into the mundane. And at first she doesn't know what to make of it. But it's where she gets the first hint that they're being caught up into a much larger game. But like I said, exactly. It's like, but in her mundane world, her everyday life, her aspirations are to be an artist, to learn her craft, to one day happily own a gallery, and then eventually make enough money for her and her mother to have a comfortable lifestyle. I take a bit of myself into each of these characters. So, like for example, I was raised by a single parent, and so she has a single parent, and I sort of understand the the desire, even as a teenager, to say, okay, like, I'm going to take this responsibility on myself to find a skill or what I can do that's unique to me and try to make it into something so I can better myself and better my family.
Wow. So yeah, that's
I definitely understand that.
yeah, that's right, Matt. And yeah, I could, I can't quite relate myself, but I can kind of seeing from the outside, I can definitely see how that would definitely be a big factor, especially in this character's life here.
Right, now, and so the other interesting thing is, out of the three characters, so she to me is sort of a proxy for the audience because she knows no Chinese whatsoever at the beginning of the story.
Yeah,
so she knows
well,
Chinese is a normal.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you there. I was just gonna say because I was gonna ask, is she kind of like a foreigner in a sense in this story?
Well, I mean, you could think of a normal American teenager, right? Like, if I take a normal American teenager,
you said she was from America, right? I forgot because like I keep forgetting. So they're from Oregon. All three are from Oregon. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. They're like all best friends,
okay.
And they're going to high school in Oregon. Like they are your typical American teenagers.
Oh wow! So yeah, so for them going back to these Chinese lands, it's really like a fish out of water in a sense.
To different degrees. For her, it's the most fish out of water because she has no connection with the language, no connection with the culture, doesn't know these stories from anything, and so she has to start from zero.
Oh wow! Yeah, that's really interesting, and also I find interesting that she kind of has this background as an artist because it kind of plays into the magic with the brushes, and so that I feel like that really plays well with that.
Yeah, one of the things I always found interesting, especially with Chinese characters, they did research as to what part of the brain is used, when you're writing, and for Chinese, it actually uses the abstract part of your brain, not the normal logical part like you do with writing. It's more artistic.
Right, that makes sense because it's all about symbols in Chinese, and that's really interesting. I could definitely see that.
Yeah, so like I said, she's the artist of the group. Like I said, she's perceptive. She's more sensitive. She's more in tune with the emotional aspect. So she has sort of a front row seat to this larger spiritual game that's being played. Not necessarily knowing all what's going on, but she's the one most in tune with it.
Kind of like does she have like? Does she sense this other kind of realm, or maybe kind of explain that a little bit more?
So essentially what you're going to see in the webcomic coming up, I don't want to do too many spoilers.
Right, yeah, definitely, obviously, definitely want to do that.
she's going to be visited basically by these people from these fairy tales, from this sort of world I've created of Chinese history and fairy tales. She's going to be in direct contact with them. She's going to be visited by them. She won't necessarily know what's going on or what how they interpret these symbols, but because she's so empathic, she has this sort of ready conduit in order for them to try to reach out to her.
And do they have good intentions?
Well, you have to find out that part.
All
Oof.
right, yeah,
Yeah,
really.
that is true. You can't tell us everything.
No, but it could go either way,
So as
honestly.
that is true, but as far as some of the other ones, like some of the other characters are, is it like specific to an item that they're using, or can they like basically like just draw with their hands and everything as far as creating the spells?
So the brush is the focal point. The brush is what you have to use in order to use their power. If they don't have the brush, they can't use their power. So that is a limitation. If their
Kind
brushes
of
were
like a
to, in
magic
fact,
wand if
away
in
from them,
the
that'd be
in the
bad.
most big. Oh, sorry. So what were you saying?
Oh, I was just basically saying if they're, if in the story perhaps their brush would be taken away from them, they wouldn't have access to their powers.
Oh,
Okay,
so
yeah,
they
yeah.
all have brushes, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Each one does.
Okay. For some reason, I think once when you said that she was an artist, my brain probably went like, oh, so
Maybe she was
she's
the
the
one with the
only
brush.
one with it.
Yeah. No, well, it kind of makes me think of like magic wands in a sense of like the most basic level of where you
It,
Oh
need
yeah,
it,
exactly.
a
in a
device.
sense, yeah,
Right.
that's why I can, my brain kind of clicked back to that, going, oh, that's right. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes sense, and but I love it too because again, it goes back to the whole tying it back to Chinese mythology, but also calligraphy and the characters. So it's such a fun take on it. It's a really cool idea.
Well, not only that, it's also kind of like with what you were saying, like the calligraphy, but with their missions to kind of fix the past and everything else like
Mhm.
that. Like that makes a lot of sense why they would have brushes instead of like actual weaponry in a sense.
True, right. That's true. They're not there to destroy. They're there to create, in a sense.
Yeah, they're not there to like take everything over. They're there to sort of observe. They're there to
Hmm.
participate. They're there to fix, to understand, and those things. And the brushes, it's super open ended. Like I said, you can write any Chinese character you want.
You're just limited by your knowledge of Chinese character, I suppose, right?
Exactly. So for example, that's why I said Michelle is starting from zero. She's like your average American teenager who's never seen a spoken Chinese language.
Well, that's interesting. So for her, she essentially has to, her training is essentially having to learn more characters, I would think, right?
Exactly.
That's really clever, yeah. So she can be the newbie, and in sense having to be taught by the others.
Right. So like, if you want to show some more of the
Sure, yeah,
characters,
definitely.
so
Go
it's
here.
basically the
Go
team
up
is
here.
three people. Go ahead.
And yeah,
Right.
so
So
what can you
this
tell
is
about
Jason.
this guy?
Yep. So Jason he's in fact Chinese. He was born in Qingdao, which is actually a city I used to live in China. I lived in China for about two
Oh wow,
years.
really? Oh, that's cool.
Yes.
Wow,
It was a
that's
good experience.
awesome,
It was a
man.
fantastic experience.
I bet. Wow, that's really cool.
So Jason is from China, but he moved when he was young. So he like 7 years old. He moved. Him and his parents moved to Oregon and brought his grandparents with them. So he is sort of like 1 foot in one culture, 1 foot in another culture, so to speak. But his grandparents, his parents, they made a point for him to study Chinese characters and to still be, knowledgeable about the culture, even though he doesn't live there, or that, I'm saying he's more Americanized than anything else. And
Hmm.
so he knows the most out of the three of them.
Oh, really? Oh, interesting.
So
Now, is
he
it because of
starts off a little more powerful.
is it because they kind of really instilled in him an understanding of kind of where they came from in a way?
So I have a lot of friends who immigrated from China to the U.S. and from my conversations with them, I sort of took elements from their own backstories and sort of melded them. It depends on how much your parents wanted to emphasize that during your upbringing. If they
Hmm.
came to America and they were just like, okay, well, the old country is the old country, and that's it. We're just going to leave that behind. Then the parents don't take time out, after school. Like one friend of mine, her parents were adamant she learn Chinese characters. So after school, she'd go to regular American school. She'd come home at like, 3:45, 4 o'clock, and she spent an hour or two just studying Chinese writing, reading
Wow.
books, writing characters, things like that.
That's intense.
Oh man.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, bad. But hey, I mean, if I were to honestly do that, I'd probably do the same. You know, it's always a good skill to have too later on in life.
Yeah, I mean, learning a language, especially when you're young, it's so much. From what I understand, it's a lot easier even to learn a language when you're younger.
Oh,
A second language.
from some of my friends, yeah, from because a lot of them were Hispanic and everything. I would go to their house and they would be speaking two languages sometimes, and I'm like, man, how do you do this? And they're like, oh, this is just what I grew up with. I was like, man, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's normal
No,
for
you're
them from
right.
their perspective.
Mhm.
True. That's very true. Yeah.
So
And
I
so
mean,
for
but it
him,
depends
that's
how
kind
far
of
you
like
go,
his
though.
situation. What's
Yeah,
that?
exactly. He would speak Chinese with his parents at home. Like if you were to like walk in his house on like any given day, right? He wouldn't be speaking English with them. But when he goes
He'd
to
be
school,
speaking Chinese. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. When he goes to school, his American friends, he has to go to school in America, so everything's in English. That's fine. He's bilingual.
Okay. So it really is kind of fits in. It can fit in any situation that he finds himself in there.
Well, see, that's the question, though, right? Because he did leave when he was 7, and
Mm-hmm.
because of that, he doesn't have a lot of the same reinforcement that he would have gotten if he had stayed in China. So, for example, once you move to America, you're not going to read a Chinese newspaper, right? You're not going to use the language as much. You're not going to go to school and learn as you would as if you were in China. So there's that part that's a little bit missing just from the situation.
In a sense, it'd be like he has the fundamentals down, but he may be a little rusty in certain areas.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would expect, and maybe some of the history he's not too clear on, and where he's thinking maybe one thing, it could be
Right.
a
Yeah.
completely opposite.
True. Huh. Yeah.
And that
Like
could
maybe
get
he goes to
him
one of
in
these.
trouble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's very good inspiration on that aspect.
Yeah. Yeah. That'll be fun. Yeah. I could definitely see that. Now,
Because
there's another
they have to rely
character.
on him.
Right, and well, that's what I was going to say because obviously there's a trio of characters, and we're going to take a look at the third character here in just a moment. But is the other character is that his sibling,
So no,
or are
they're
they
basically
friends?
they're friends. They each
All
have a
three friends.
different sort
Okay.
of how they met. Yeah, they're 3 friends. They have I do have a backstory on how they all met, which will be revealed as the webcomic goes on. But they're very good. They start off as pretty good friends.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay. So all with different backgrounds. Then it sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. So like, they each bring what I wanted to do with each character is I wanted them to bring something different to the table. So like,
Kind
for
of
example,
a different
he brings his
dynamic.
knowledge
Yeah.
of the culture.
Mm-hmm.
But his personality he's very like forthright. He is like, this is what I think is right, and this is what I want to do, and then we're gonna go do it, right? So he'll push.
He's a bit headstrong.
Yeah, exactly. Which has good and bad aspects to it.
Right. It can be good for certain situations and definitely bad for other situations. Yeah, that's a dicey one.
So, like I said, they each start off, with their own personalities. They're young, right? So they're just sort of coming out into the world, but they each have their own personality, and we'll see through them going through each of these tales and this history how their personality interacts with the world around them, for good or for bad.
And does he have you mentioned the other character was an artist. What is it? Does he have kind of a passion or something that he is pursuing?
Sports, essentially.
Sports.
He
Okay.
has, yeah, so he's a basketball player. He loves
Right.
anything physical. Like I said, there's a little bit of people I know and all the characters. Like I have a friend who like he did football and basketball and soccer. Like he's the kind that like needs to move.
Yeah.
So
So
he
he's,
yeah.
So in a sense, he's more of you could say that where the artist is more of like the brains in a sense. He's more of the bronze and more of the fighter.
Well, I would say the artist is more of the heart, that she is more emotionally in tune. He's definitely the brawn of the group. The next character would be the brains.
Okay.
And speaking of which, why don't we take a look at that third character here? And
Yep.
as I'm pulling her character up, what is the third character's name that we're gonna take a look at here?
Sabrina Kennedy.
Nice, I like that name. That's fun.
Yeah, she's the
No
brains of
relation
the group.
to Leon Kennedy.
Yeah, no
I assume. She's the brains, huh?
So
Brains of the operation.
her character in the background is Zhi, which means wisdom. And
Mm-hmm.
so she is sort of again, people I know, I've taken aspects of them, put them into the characters. She is the kind of person who knows where she wants to go and knows how she's going to get there, right? Like, I am going to graduate from school with a 4.0. I am going to apply to an Ivy League school. I'm going to graduate, and then I'm going to get top honors and get into a Fortune 500 company, right? So she's that kind of person. She will do the work necessary to get those things, and she's highly organized and highly focused.
Okay. So she's going to be the one to kind of I would think she's probably going to be the heavy hitter with the historical knowledge and that kind of aspect of things.
And there may be cases where she knows more than Jason, despite the fact that he's technically speaking should be closer to the culture than she would, because she's also just an American teenager. She knows some Chinese because, like I said, she's a little bit of an overachiever. So she took some basic classes, so she knows some characters and some of the basics of how to write. So she's not completely out of her depth. So that's what I kind of plan with it. So Jason would know the most. So he would be the most capable of using the brushes for their full power. She'd be sort of in the middle, and then Michelle is sort of like, I've never written a Chinese character in my entire life.
Wow.
Oh wow, the three stages of it in a sense.
Yeah, really. The beginner, the intermediate, and the master, or the beginning master, I guess you could say. And I like how Neostar puts it on the chat. He says, "Brain, brawn, and heart." Nice trifecta. That's a good way of looking at it. Yeah, really. They all balance each other nicely. Like you said, you kind of wanted to have them each bring something different to the table.
Right, because I wanted it to be sort of like one of the sub themes that is going to occur throughout the first story arc is like, why were we chosen for this, right? Like, why were we put into these, sometimes dangerous situations? Chinese fairy tales, like if you've read ever the original Grimm's fairy tales, like they can be a little dicey, right? So they're going to be put in some dangerous situations. And they're gonna be like, well, why? Like, what do we bring to the table? I kind of want this to be sort of partly coming of age, where it's like, learning who you are as a person, your strengths and weaknesses, and then how they play off other people. So, like I said, there's going to be situations where she's going to shine. There's going to be some situations where Jason is going to shine, and some places where it's like, you need you need to get in there and take action. Or sometimes you need to hold back and read the situation. It just depends.
And they're going to learn those things as they kind of go along. I'm sure stumble and along the way and to figure those things out.
Exactly.
Very nice. Well, I love that. Yeah, that is a great, I think it is a great combination of characters that you've got here. And it does seem like they're each of their, having different backgrounds and coming together as friends will make them a really interesting dynamic as opposed to maybe, something other that you could have done, like maybe like I mentioned earlier with the siblings. So I do feel like that's a cool dynamic.
Because it's I wanted something that the audience could relate to. I wanted something maybe a little bit off the beaten path, and something you want main characters, like I said, where you look at them at the beginning, you look at them at the end, and you ask yourself, okay, where they start and where they end at, and what was their journey from point A to point B. And I wanted something to where like I said, they are friends, and they have great backstories how they met each other and how they became friends. But you're friends with someone, but it doesn't mean like you click on every single level. So there is going to be some interpersonal conflict that's going to occur, especially in these stressful situations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Even the best of friends can get, can have the, biggest fight. So that's very true. Heck, I think me and Matt have had a few of those ourselves back in the past.
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
But you worked through them, right?
definitely.
True,
You
true friends always work
always,
through them.
always.
So,
It's the best way. You know, it's also one of those signs that if you can work through it, then definitely that you can handle a lot more strife.
yeah, true. And I'm sure the characters in this story are going to be facing a lot of strife. So they'll definitely be needing that, man.
Oh yeah, it seems like a lot more than what me and you have tussled about.
Just a little bit. I actually had a question, like something that I was curious about. How do you deal with or address the kind of the idea of different languages in the comics? So, like for example, having English speakers go back into I would think a mostly predominantly Chinese speaking country. How do you handle the
Uh-huh.
difference there and address that?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. So first off, that's going to be quite a problem, isn't it? If I were to
Yeah.
take you and throw you 1,000 years in China's past and say, okay, here's a brush, it's magic, good luck, I have some problems.
Yeah, really. I don't think I could do much with that, even with the magic brush.
So they run into a lot of linguistic problems, and normally in comic books, sometimes when they go to other countries or they deal with other cultures, they sort of hand wave it away that everyone speaks English. But I don't do that, so I'm dealing directly with it.
Right.
So first off, Sabrina
Interesting.
and Michelle do not speak Chinese, or like Sabrina speaks like she said a year. She knows some phrases, she knows some words, but a conversation that's like beyond her ability. So they're highly reliant on Jason, but with China, it's here. Let me give you a story. For example, I lived in the city of Qingdao for about 2 years. I was teaching at a high school, international high school at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in an area called Huangdao, which is a subsection of the city of Qingdao. Huangdao was essentially, it used to be just like forest and swamp and marshland, but they developed it. They, cleared everything out. They built a bunch of apartments and high rises. The Chinese government wanted to move people from the countryside to the urban area. And so they built all these apartments and they, sold them for cheap to whoever wanted one. And so we had a bunch of people who came from the countryside into the city looking for better economic opportunity and housing and better schooling for their children, etc. So I would speak Mandarin Chinese, which is a dialect of quote unquote Chinese, which is the main one. But I would go like down to the local get some produce. I live next to a market, so you go there. There's like lettuce and fruit and whatever else you want. And this is my second week in China. I want to go shopping. I just want to get some food, and then I start talking, and she's speaking a completely different dialect. I have no idea what she's saying, like not even.
Oh my god! Wow,
And
that's
we
insane.
just like sort of mime our way through the transaction, like pointing in like fingers, right? Like I'll take this for 30. Okay, great. And I that was my first real like. Oh, wait a second, I thought I was in China, and then I learned dialects.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. The idea that you could be speaking dialects of the same language and not really even be able to understand each other still. That is so wild.
It's so weird because what my uncle is actually half Chinese, and from what I learned is that he speaks Mandarin, but there's I guess three from what he knows. There's one I don't remember Mandarin, and then I want to say Cantonese is the
Yes.
other one that he knows very, very little of. And I was
Yeah,
like, wait, why is there three? He's like, I don't know. I don't know. It's
right.
just there is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really.
Cantonese would be like the Cantonese is what Americans are actually more used to. Like if you look at, like listen to some kung fu movies, or like if you look at like Chinese menu restaurants, like they'll use more Cantonese for people who come from Hong Kong or Guangzhou who come to America. And in the area I lived in, that was not the predominant language. There's a Qingdao dialect, and I got to learn some of it because I wanted to speak to people. But then I visited the nearby province. In a city called Wuxi. It's like Are we like, how is like this still Chinese? It doesn't even sound like Chinese. It doesn't sound like Mandarin.
Wow, that's fascinating, man. That was really cool.
Yeah,
Did you pick
seriously.
it up? Did you end up like pick up any bits and pieces of any dialects, like other dialects like that?
So the Qingdao dialect, I was able to get some of it because it's close. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like, for example, instead of "ao," like any word that has "ao" in it, like Qingdao is the name of the city. In Qingdao dialect, you say "Qingdou," and so like I would
Mm.
remember that. Like if I normally would say "ao," instead I replace it with "o," and that was
And
fine.
and correct me if I'm wrong here, but unlike a lot of most of the language I would even say, Chinese has kind of pitch variance that can actually change meaning. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct.
Wow, yeah. So that definitely that even there's it's a very complicated, not it's a very complex language, I should say. It takes a lot to
So
be able to learn it.
there's four tones and a fifth neutral tone, and
Mm. Mhm.
so for to give you a concrete example, ma, where you hear how my voice was like steady and high, that is mother. But if I start off high and then go low with my tone of voice, if I go ma, like start off high and just drop, that means to scold someone.
Oh wow, you only get that one wrong.
It's yeah, you like, it's like a completely different word, and so like as an American, I was like, we don't really American like English is a flat intonation language, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't have a lot of like ups and downs, and so
Yeah.
like controlling my voice to be able to have to go up and down, and then remember like, okay, second tone means hemp, but third tone is horse, and fourth tone is to scold someone. Which one do I use?
Wow, yeah, dude.
Yeah, that
That
is pretty weird. That
yeah,
is
it
very
really,
complicated,
especially
but
for us English
that
speakers.
sounds really cool to learn, though.
Mm-hmm. True.
It becomes second nature after you get used to it after a while. Like you just sort of mimic what people around you are saying, and this is why I went back to sort of reinforcement from your environment. Is that you know you need that constant reinforcement of going to the store, hearing people just chat in the aisle, walking on the street, hearing people talk on their cell phone, looking at storefronts. That all of that is reinforcement, even if you don't notice it.
Watching TV shows probably too, I would think, like in Chinese.
Yep, exactly. So like anything in the language that you're doing, and so like while I was in China, I got like I made a point to try to learn as much as I could while I was there. So I put myself in situations where I was forced to like going shopping. Like the person I went to the local the main mall in the area I lived in is called Jiashike, Just Go in English, and so like that was the supermarket, and I didn't go to like the international shops. I went to places where it's like I have to talk to someone in Chinese to get what I want. They don't speak English. To force
You made a
myself.
challenge. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. What was that like living in China for 2 years? Was that like? I mean, you mentioned it was one of the coolest experiences earlier, but like, what was it like living, day to day in another country?
It was okay. So you kind of go through these phases because I've lived in other countries before. I've lived in South Korea. I've lived in Singapore,
Well, you've
and
been all over,
so
man.
I've been a lot of places. So like you go through your what I call the honeymoon period of like the first 3 to 6 months where everything's new,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Everything's fresh and new and exciting. Even like mundane stuff like going to the grocery store because there's all these
Hmm.
differences. And then after like the honeymoon period, you start to get into the where certain things are like, well, man, I really miss this, and I haven't. To give you a concrete example, cheese is super expensive, right? I could not go
Hmm.
down. I could go down to the local convenience store 5 minutes from my apartment and get like all sorts of like Chinese snacks, right? But I really wanted a grilled cheese sandwich one day. I had to take a bus ride 20 minutes to like the big mega store where they would have the international food section, and their cheese section was like maybe like a foot wide and super expensive. But
Tiny.
I just had a craving for a grilled cheese sandwich.
Yeah, that's just really funny. You wouldn't think about something like that, from our perspective. But yeah, even something like cheese, they probably don't have a lot of. I don't know for sure, but I would think that they probably don't necessarily have a lot of dairy cows in China.
Dairy's not a
You
big
know,
thing. Dairies, like that's what like after the 6 months you start to notice. It's like in America, right? Like you go to the grocery store, you get yourself a gallon of milk, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you get because you're gonna drink it during put in your cereal, drink it during the week, use it for all sorts of things. You don't really think about it till you start missing it till you don't have it, and then you're like, well, I really like some milk, but do I really want to go on a bus ride for the next 25 minutes to go get some?
Geez, yeah, that's really interesting. It's kind of something you don't necessarily think about until you get there, I would think.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then even from that point, it's like even someone like me who really loves Chinese food, it would be more of like sitting there having it all the time, and then finally sitting there like, I'm kind of getting a little sick of this, man. I kind of want a
Yeah, a little bit.
burger. I want a steak.
Yeah, like
Yeah, really. Yeah,
like I said, the
yeah.
first
Well,
three to
that
six
is
months is honeymoon.
right. And well, I'm sure before those three. I mean, what is the food? I mean, was it? You know, getting sick of it all aside, what was the food like? Was it pretty awesome to kind of experience the different cultural,
Huge variety.
through the food? Yeah, really.
Huge variety because Qingdao is on the Pacific Ocean, so their specialty is seafood. So I had like mussels, crabs,
Mm,
starfish. We went to the like what's called food alley, and so you
uh,
go there. They had like all sorts of things. Stuff I would like starfish. They had scorpion.
that's
They
wild.
had like just sort of like seahorse. I was like, and like
Dang.
you're thinking to yourself, like
Yeah.
you eat a seahorse? Like, yes, you can eat a seahorse.
Oh my god, what was the craziest thing you tried? Did you try any of the exotic stuff?
Oh, of course, starfish,
Really? What's
which
it like, man? I can imagine. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it's not that flavorful.
Hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
like really really hard jerky.
Mm.
It
Char
wasn't my
jerky.
favorite. I
That
would
that
not
just
recommend.
that just sounds really weird, especially
Yeah.
for me who doesn't like seafood. That all of that just sounds like all those are edible. That is weird.
That was my first thought. Like I'm staring. I'm at this stall, right? And it's a busy place. There's people walking back and forth. You can get a smoothie. You can buy food. And I'm staring at this stall, which has got like seahorses and scorpion and starfish and all these other things. And I'm just sort of like, you can eat this? I guess you can. I mean, if I was hungry enough, I guess I would. Maybe I'll try it, see what it's like.
Yeah, really. Hey, don't knock it till you try it, I guess, right?
Yeah, true. I mean, trying to think about it. I mean, I've seen people eat scorpion before on the internet, so it's like, okay,
Yeah, I've heard of
I
that one before.
guess,
That's true, yeah.
but I've never seen anyone eat a seahorse before or
Yeah,
starfish.
that's a new one for
Right.
me. That's definitely a new one, yeah.
But
Wow, that's
okay,
wild. Well, that's interesting. And what about the scenery? Is it beautiful landscapes there?
Oh, see, that's the thing, and that's kind of tying back to the artistic style. China, one of the artistic styles that they have is they have such gorgeous landscapes. I'm saying like valleys and like huge mountains. Like, we were near Mount Lao, Laoshan,
Mm.
and you can climb it. You can go to you can go to Laoshan, and you can like walk up the mountain and you can it's really beautiful at sunset, right? So you try to do it late at night with a group of people, and there's a temple at the top, and you're relaxing, there's people meditating, and then you can watch the sun set or you can watch the sun come up, and it's just gorgeous. Like it's like out of a postcard.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like you'd almost have like this magical sense, almost
oh
kind of
yeah,
going about.
definitely.
You look
Yeah, I
at
just love that.
rising from the
Yeah.
ground.
Oh my God. I feel like that would be really inspirational to kind of write stories. Did your trip? Do you feel like your trip inspired what you ultimately did here with your webcomic?
Well, I actually got to go and visit. So in the Legend of the White Snake Maiden, Bai Jun is the name of the heroine. She is the white snake who wants to ascend to be enlightened, but instead chooses to marry a human. Part of that story is, in the original story, is that because her marriage to the human is forbidden by law, there's a Buddhist monk named Fahai, and he is sort of this very rules-oriented character. Like this is wrong, and so he uses his power to break them up. And he takes the White Snake Maiden, Bai Sujun, and locks her up in Leifeng Pagoda, to sort of take the two lovers and separate them away from each other forever. And it's like there is a broken bridge, which is West Lake, and there is that pagoda. You can go visit it. And that was, to me, was really cool to see the actual site that inspired this tale. And I was like, this story is epic. It's got to be, I got to do something with it.
That's really cool. Yeah, I feel like that would be a really special moment to be able to go visit something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
And has so much history behind it too. I mean, that's the other thing. Like, I always think about this too. Is like coming from living in America, we have such a country that is relatively very young and has such a short history. But you look at China, and their history is so long and so ancient. There's like thousands of years of history, and so those spots have so to me they're really powerful locations like that.
Yeah, you have I while I was there, like I said, I taught at an international school. American history is like a blip compared to theirs.
Yeah, yeah, really.
In all honesty, it's like barely a dynasty. And you go to some of these places, and you're taking the tour. And it's like, yeah, this restaurant's 600 years old, and it's like, what?
Oh, jeez. Oh, wow.
Like 1,000 years is like, yeah, cool. It's 1,000 years. It's been here for a long time. I'm like, wow, okay.
Yeah, that's really cool. As a person who really loves history, I feel like just going there and just to be able to walk through that country would just be fascinating alone, just to see, just all the historical spots and just to, learn about this country. It's really cool.
That's why I tried to take time while I was there. They have a high-speed rail network, which is fairly inexpensive. And I took advantage of it. I was like, okay, I want to go to Nanjing. I want to go to Wuxi. I want to go visit Qufu, which is supposedly Confucius's birthplace. And see these old temples. See these old bridges. Visit these old capitals, old Chinese emperors. You know what I'm saying? While you're there.
Yeah, there's just so much to see. Yeah, it would be incredible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would love to be able to go one day. And do you kind of bring those elements into your comic? Do you try and showcase the landscape and the history? Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I use use real use photos. I want to broken bridge, the pagoda at Leifeng Pagoda. I want to use those sort of in Japan. So there's a slight stylistic difference. China, with their landscapes, they like to go epic. It's very magisterial, right? They want a huge pagoda atop a tower with all this mist. It's very dramatic.
On top of a giant mountain, like we see here, you got the pagoda on top of a mountain. It's a very epic kind of
right, and that's the pagoda that the White Snake Maiden's trapped in, right? So she's on the left, and Fahai, the priest who has sealed her away in this pagoda to separate her from her love, is on the right. So we're already seeing elements of that story right on the cover.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. This is a great concept. You've really got something so special and unique here that I feel like you really, and not only that, but your execution is really well done.
Thank you.
You're welcome, man. Yeah, I'm excited. I'd love to keep reading this and each week. And you said it releases on Thursdays and Fridays. Is that correct?
Oh, Wednesdays and Fridays.
Wednesdays and Fridays. Okay, yes. And how many pages out? And are you? Wait, quick question before I go to how many pages are you breaking them up into issues, or are there any kind of breaking up the stories, or how do you do that exactly?
So right now it's one page per day of release. So on Wednesday you'll get a page, on Friday you'll get the next page, etc. And then as I get more out, I'll group them into sort of logical sets.
Okay.
But you can think of the first issue. I'm a planner. I like to outline and plan and really think ahead. So the first issue is 44 pages. So once you'll see it 44 pages, and that will be the first introduction of the story.
First arc, you could say.
Yeah, exactly. You'll meet the characters. You'll understand the premise. You'll get into the story and get into the world. And then the next issue where I will start with the first fairy tale we're going to tackle, which is the Princes of Yelang.
I see. So in this first 44-page issue, it's more of an introduction to who our main characters are.
Yeah, so you're gonna get to know them, their personalities, their lives, and then you're also going to come to understand. I take some time to really explain the Legend of the White Snake Maiden because a lot of people don't know that, and sort of do a back and forth of like the mundane world and the fantasy world starting to combine and collide with each other.
Nice. Give it a really nice introduction, kind of lay it out and kind of make us understand who the characters are and kind of want to know their story before sending them on their adventure.
Right, and then also understanding what their adventure is. What generally speaking, what will they be doing? What's expected of them? And then start to touch on those things. And then once we get into the meat of it, once we start going from fairy tale to fairy tale. Because I'm going to start, Princess of Yelang is the first one. Then we're going to do Lady of the Great Wall, which is a very famous Chinese fable. You can look it up. Then we're going to do like the New Year's Monster, the story of why the Chinese fire off firecrackers and do the dragon dance at New Year's. We're going to do that. We're going to do Butterfly Lovers. Very famous tales, and they're going to go from and you're the audience will be the characters and the audience. I kind of feel are going to work together. In that you're going to learn together. You're going to experience this together.
Yeah, and that's so cool. There's so many really interesting stories. I feel like in these classic fairy tales and folklores that we as Western viewers just aren't aware of. So for us, it's going to be like discovering all these stories for the first time. I feel like it's a great way for you to introduce a whole new generation, a whole new audience to those kind of stories.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Definitely.
That's great, yeah. And the comic, as you said, is going to be rolling out weekly. Is there anything you can maybe tease us or tease the audience about the future of your comic? Any hints or anything you want to drop without spoiling anything, of course?
Okay, so besides the stories I'll be going into, like I said, I've already said these are famous stories. You can easily Google the Butterfly Lovers. The Yin, which is the name of the New Year's Monster, the Three Great Evils. The first story arc will definitely deal with Legend of the White Snake Maiden. I am going to take the classic love story. Again, the story is 700 years old, and as 700-year-old stories go, there's a lot of different variations of it. I went with the love story variation, which most Chinese people, like. But that will be the first arc, but it's going to be my own rendition of the story. So it's not going to follow it all the way through because part of the story is there's a way things should go, but they haven't gone that way. We're going to have to figure out how to set things right. And there's going to be a lot of give and take and conflict as to how that actually resolves. In the future, we are definitely going to do War of the Three Kingdoms. That
would be an epic one.
Yeah, that'd be very epic. Like there's going to be Cao Cao and the Obey and Sun Quan and like all, I'm saying there's going to be a big conflict. And then, we're going to come back to the real world for a while and see what happens there.
That's really cool. Yeah, there's a lot to look forward to. A lot of really cool stories.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it. I'll probably be keeping my eye on it for sure.
Oh, definitely, man. That's for sure. Yeah, and speaking of which, maybe what would you say to people who are kind of considering checking out your book at this time?
So right now, every Wednesday and Friday, look for new pages. If you are, I have a Patreon set up, and patrons can get, for example, early access. You can see the pages before they come out. So they come out Wednesdays. You'll be able to see them Tuesday. You also get sort of behind the scenes. I'll show you kind of the sketches. Like you'll be able to compare like the sketch to what's actually the final published page. And for the top tier, I've got special patron-only artwork that you can use for your desktop wallpaper. It'll just be for patrons only, and it shows like specific scenes from some of these tales that I'll be telling. So like scenes from Legend of the White Snake Maiden, scenes from Lady in the Great Wall, scenes from War of the Three Kingdoms. Creatively done as is as with the characters in it, and that would be for the top tier patrons, and they'll be able to get access to that.
Nice, kind of a little something extra, a little bonus for the people who are helping support the comic and help getting it made.
Yeah, I feel if you're supporting
Hmm.
the comic, you should get something exclusive. You know what I'm saying? You want to be part of a special
Yeah,
club.
definitely. Yeah, that's nice, man. I think that's a great way to do it, and honestly, it gets people on the ground level of getting something they really love out there. So I think that's a smart way to do it, man. And I encourage people to go check out the link we just posted there and take a look at the page and see if there's something like there, and maybe back at that yourself.
The other thing I'm going to put out on the website in the coming weeks, and this is the the teacher aspect of me. I guess I was a elementary and middle school teacher for about 8 years. Is I'm going to be doing Chinese character of the week. So
Oh, that's
um,
cool.
the characters are going to be learning. The characters in the story are going to be learning Chinese. So I to help sort of demystify it. Like you can see like in the picture here, kind of a demonstration of the power, right? So like when you write the character for light, then that's what happens. And so we're gonna you can see the power of words. That's the other kind of theme I wanted to go into, like the power of the written word.
Hmm.
And so to sort of demystify this, I was going to teach people like this is how you write Chinese characters. For example, Chinese characters have stroke order. You don't just write
Mm-hmm.
them willy nilly. You have to. There's a certain order you're supposed to do each part in. And how
Wow.
do you handle that? Like how do you write a two-stroke character versus a four-stroke character? What are some tips to like learning and memorizing these things, reading them? I kind of want to share tips and tricks I've learned, through my own study of the language.
I think that's really smart because not only can someone who's like kind of a casual reader, find that fun and interesting, but I feel like people who are really interested in maybe learning the language can also get value out of that too. So that can be a really
Exactly.
fun little a bonus, you might say. No, that's really cool. And again, like you mentioned earlier, this or just a moment ago, we're seeing the kind of the power of the character being displayed here in this panel. What is the character that she's writing there?
So the character is Guang, which is light. First tone. So
Hmm.
first tone is you keep your intonation high and level. So Guang. Um, but in different dialects, it could be said differently. So Chinese characters, just to give you kind of a little bit of historical tidbit, the power of the character is that the character itself has a concept behind it, not necessarily a pronunciation. So
Mm.
that character right there, if you were to go to Japan and write that character to a Japanese person, they would understand that you meant light, but they would use a completely different pronunciation. They would say hikaru.
Oh,
Like
wow.
they would say completely different, but the concept of light is shared. So if you're
Ah.
writing in Chinese characters, it doesn't matter necessarily. Like if you're the Chinese emperor and you have an edict or a decree you want your subjects to read, you can write in Chinese characters, send it, across the country to people who speak a completely different dialect. But because
Ah.
they're reading it for the concepts, they understand what you're talking about, regardless of the pronunciation.
Whoa. Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah, seriously, that's pretty cool too.
And that's because of the way that the characters are designed.
Yeah, exactly. So like it's if we go back thousands of years, like 4 or 5 thousand years, it started off as ideograms. If you look at like very early like stone carvings and turtle shell carvings of Chinese characters, they look like the character for some look like the sun. The character for certain animals
Mm-hmm.
look like the animal. But then over time, when they needed more complicated ID to morph. So like this, this you can look at this symbol and you're like, well, what does that have to do with light? But the trick is to just learn this symbol and learn that it maps to this concept of light, and then you
And
can
then you can
learn
start
also
picking it
learn
up. Yeah.
exactly. And that's kind of where I got the idea for this, is because like initially, like with reading, I had to sort of visualize like I couldn't just like the normal way you learn Chinese characters and like kanji in Japanese, which is you write them over and over and over again, right? You take out your notebook and you do the strokes and you write them over and over and over again until you memorize them. I'm a much more visual person, so like when I learn characters, I visualize them as like glowing or on fire or doing stuff. That's helped me to memorize them, and that's what
Oh,
inspired this
wow.
comic. Is okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's what I did in my head. So like light in my head, I picture this like blazing bright light.
And that's kind of almost like what you mentioned earlier about these stories that they use to kind of help children learn these characters. It's in a sense it's like that where you're trying to associate these concepts in your mind with the characters themselves.
Exactly.
Wow, yeah. No, that's really interesting, man. It's fascinating to hear someone who really has an in-depth knowledge of language and you bringing that into the concepts of your comic. I feel like that's pretty awesome. That's gonna be really and they don't. I actually wanted to ask is the actions we're seeing in this panel, is that kind of like mimicking the motion, the different strokes with the character?
That so I work with an artist that has been a little bit of a back and forth. So that's not exactly how you would write it. So for example, you write Chinese characters like left to right, top down. So those two little like marks on the side and left and right, you would write those first, then go the top down, then over, and then you do the bottom part. So
okay.
But I wanted to be exciting, you know what I'm saying? Like I wanted to be like,
Right,
wow.
yeah, it is a comic, yeah. So now I feel like there's some you can get away with a little bit there, yeah.
A little artistic liberty.
Yeah, really. And so you mentioned you work with an artist. Then how did you first come to meet with your the artist that you work with?
I just sort of put my feelers out for someone that I talk with a group of people. I had like as a writer, it's a little bit difficult to like because I cannot draw myself.
Yeah, I'm with you, man.
But I have this idea, and I'm just like, I want to get this idea out, and I talk with different people on different online boards, and some people worked out, some people didn't, and then we just sort of found each other, and he thought my idea was really cool, and then he did some sketches for me. I'm like, okay, we're on the same wavelength.
That's always the best, man. When you get start getting stuff back, you're like, okay, this is perfect. Like that's the ideal kind of artist relationship you want right there.
And we've developed a working relationship over the weeks. You know what I'm saying? Like he'll show me sketches, we'll do a lot of back and forth. And in the beginning, it was a lot of like, because he doesn't know Chinese at all. So like little things, like I'd be like, well, no, there's a dot here. Well, who cares if there's a dot here? I'm like, no, the dot is important. There's no like this means pig, but this means dog if you put a dot there.
Oh gosh. Oh geez, yeah. That's the subtle differences really make it, yeah. Like this.
Yeah, I could see where the confusion and how serious that could be.
No, that's too funny. Well, that's really cool. I feel like I'm glad to hear that you guys are working well together, but I feel like his style really complements your writing here. It really brings out the stories to life. So I think it'll be really exciting to see just how this first issue unfolds.
Yeah, like I said, we're we're 3 pages in. So you kind of see, you got to meet Jason in the beginning. Like I said, I don't play coy with the audience. Something mystical is happening right off the bat. And we're going to start meeting the other characters pretty soon and sort of seeing where they're at in their life before they're thrust into this other world.
Very nice, man. Well, the comic can be checked out on his website here. I'm going to post a link here. And as we get close to wrapping up our time here, is there anything else you'd like to tease? Anything else you'd like to tell us about the series? Anything that you have on your mind there?
Oh, we went over a lot of it. Like I said, we're going to be kind of coming up into a little bit of a mystery. I will say this. Michelle, the artistic one, the one who's very perceptive, she is being reached out to by supernatural forces, and we're going to kind of see that perhaps she's one of those characters that has a lot of inner power, but does not necessarily, take ownership of it. We're going to see her growth over the series. That her perceptiveness is powerful. That Jason may have the brawn and Sabrina may have the brains, and in a lot of cases very useful. But she has the ability to really empathize, and that in turn ends up being probably the greatest resource that they have.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. They're trying to kind of go back and fix these wrongs, and so I could see how her empathetic nature could definitely come in handy there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I love the story that you've created here. And it's really interesting because you're taking these stories and you've kind of made them your own with bringing in new characters, and I'm sure there'll be plot twists and new turns and things for even the people who know the legends and the myths they might not even expect. And so I feel like there's so much to explore and so much to see with this webcomic. So I'm really excited to start following in, and honestly, just welcome you to the indie community. I always love to see new creators, and I honestly feel like you have something really cool here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Well,
Like
thank
I
you.
said, it's really great
Oh, you're
community.
welcome, man. Yeah, no, yeah, it's awesome. There's so many great people out there, and I'm sure you're going to meet a lot of great people on your journey here. And I encourage people to go check it out because, again, this is a really cool comic, and it sounds like it's just getting started here with the epic story. It sounds like you've got a lot planned. Is that right?
Oh yeah, there's a lot in store. Like I said, I've got 3 whole story arcs planned out, outline, ready to go. So there is going to be a quite the adventure awaiting everybody.
Well, that's very excellent. Well, again, go check that out. Is there anywhere people can follow you on social media so that they can make sure they check out all the stuff that you have going on?
Sure. I've got a Facebook page. You can just search for Journey to the Middle Kingdom. JTMK Comic is my Twitter handle. I'm still new to Twitter. I've never used it before. But I definitely am learning how I love messaging people. So feel free to message me. Talk to me about the comic, talk to me about life, whatever. I like to hang out and meet people and not just promote myself, but, be part of the community.
That's excellent. Yeah, and you're always welcome back on the show, man. Anytime you want to come on and promote your work and anything like that, you're always welcome.
Thank you. It's been a really good conversation.
You're welcome. Yeah, no, it's very awesome. And again, we're gonna be following you closely, man. So definitely we'll be in touch. And everyone, go
Mm-hmm.
check out his stuff online. Go check out his social media, and of course, most importantly, go check out the comic on his website. It's free right now, and so you can't beat free. So definitely go check it out. And I think once you see the first couple pages that are out there, I think you're really gonna get hooked and really want to see what the next pages are. So please go check it out, guys. And thank you again. It was really a pleasure to talk to you. And we'll see you guys on another episode of Indie Spotlight. Now go ahead
Yep.
on your journey to the Middle Kingdom. We'll see you there.